everyone, and welcome to today's live session. My name's Ashley. I'll be hosting this session today, and the session is on problem solving and making decisions. What we tend to do in these live sessions is just wait a couple of minutes for anybody else who's trying to get on and join the session. So if we can all be a little bit patient, I'll wait until about 3 or 4 minutes past, and then I'll get everything started. If you do have any questions throughout, you can ask them in the chat, and at the first natural pause in the presentation, I'll try and get round to answering them questions. If you can just hold on with me for a couple of minutes while we wait for any more attendees. Thanks. Hello all, and welcome to today's live session on Zoom for the first time, so bear with me. This is the future, so I'm adapting to the change. We usually use the platform WizIQ, where you can put your hands up and ask questions. Unfortunately, you can't do that here, but we do have the chat, and I have a colleague here who will pinpoint if that question needs answering straight away, okay? So yeah, I will answer the question at the first natural pause in the presentation. Now, this topic is going to be on solving problems and making decisions, and I am loosely basing this around Unit 300, but you know, you will need these tools and techniques in project planning, dealing with complex team activities, some forms of strategy, and any sort of implementation plan and gathering data. So although it is loosely based on Unit 300, it will be beneficial and can help you with a number of different units, or, you know, different areas within your organisation. Okay, so let's get started. So okay, so I'm firstly going to point out the unit specification. I think it's a good idea in any of these live sessions just to point you to, especially if you're a new learner, the areas that you need to be focusing on within the unit specification, okay? So if you look to the left-hand side, you can see the title of the unit spec, you can see the level, the credit value, and the guided learning hours. Now, you will also see on the left-hand side the learning outcomes. So this is basically what you will do within your assignment. Then on the right-hand side, you've got the questions or the assessment criteria that link directly to the marking sheet. Now, on any initial assessment or introduction, I would have shown you how that links to the marking sheet for the referral, the pass or the good pass. But it is important to open this document for any unit that you're working on first. It's the first document that you're going to look at, okay? So when you do look at this document, you then look at the second page, which will show you the indicative content. So this is all of the research, so all of the areas that you're going to be looking at before you make a plan to tackle your assignment. So for example, in learning outcome 1, it wants you to describe a problem, its nature, its scope, and its impact. So it's important to be able to differentiate between what it's actually asking you to do. So nature, meaning the basic or, the basic features, character or qualities of something in particular. Then you want to look at the scope. So because it is asking you a number of things there, you want to look at the breadth, the depth and the reach of that subject. And then you want to go in to look at the impact. So within this unit, you are looking at a problem and all the areas of that problem, okay? So then you can look at learning outcome 2 when you're looking at the data and the information, whether it's valid, whether it's reliable, and we'll look into that in a little bit more detail in the presentation. Then evaluating the options by using different decision-making techniques, and then going into making a plan of action, so an implementation plan. Because there's no point in, finding ways and taking time to find the problem, analyze the problem, solve the problem, find a solution, but do nothing with it. You've got to implement, you've got to action what you've done, okay? So moving forward, let's just firstly start by defining what ILM are looking at and, defining what a problem is. So the Oxford Dictionary defines a problem as a matter or a situation regarded as unwelcome or harmful and needing to be dealt with and overcome. So a thing that is difficult to achieve. Now, when you look at what a decision and the context of that, it's about finding a resolution, a conclusion, and that's reached after consideration. So thinking about the consideration. So an organisation may know that there's X, Y, and Z problems, but it's finding the time to consider them problems and how them problems can be solved, which is usually the difference between a successful organisation and an unsuccessful organisation. So problems and issues are usual, and that's what we've got to think about as a manager, line manager, supervisor, or a CEO. You've got to consider that it is usual for an organisation to have problems. It's how we use them problems to improve, to adapt, and to change. Now, finding the root cause or the symptoms is the first step. Now, root cause analysis can be used for this. It's a way to understand problem solving by asking a series of questions. So why this, why that? You can even use the technique with the 5 W's and a why, which looks at the why, what, where, how, to be able to find out where the problem stems from, what the symptoms are, and how you can actually, find a way to solve that problem. So a symptom is a sign or an indication that a problem is happening, really. So an example could be an individual's not performing. The problem, you need to find what that problem is. So finding the root cause is key. So it could be training needs, it could be contracted hours, it could be they've got conflict with someone in the workplace, so you're trying to find out what that problem is by finding the root cause, really. Okay, so just to check you all still with me, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. So we're going to go live and ask a number of questions throughout this session, just to make it interactive and make sure you're all still with me. Okay, so the first question is, who is responsible for solving problems in your workplace? So is that the line manager, the senior manager, the operations manager or everyone? So I would like your opinion on this. Can we all see the poll? Just give it a couple more minutes. Okay, so in relation to this question, thanks for sharing. In relation to this question, it is everyone that's involved or is responsible for solving problems, because that problem could be you've got 25 emails at the start of a day. How are you going to go about, solving the problem of getting through them emails? So everyone has their own little problems that they need to solve. And if you're looking at a strategic level, it could be a strategy manager or an ops manager that would look at that. But on a day-to-day basis of problem solving, we're all responsible for that. So the second question is, are problems, issues normal in your organisation? And this could be at any level, really. So I'll give it a couple of minutes for that. So yeah, every organisation does have their own look at, and you can't see the questions, Jamie, now. Like that. Yeah, it does depend. Okay, so some people that have an issue seeing the questions. So it is, it's a question for me to be able to generalise really what your thought process of problem solving is. Do you think of it from an organisational point of view? Do you think of it from a line manager's point of view, senior managers? Everyone has their own problems to deal with. If you think about it as an organisational problem, then that might be dealt with different than an individual problem. Okay, so if you're thinking about it from an organisational perspective, is it common for problems to get resolved quickly in your organisation? And whoever can see the polls, will you just try to give your answers on that one? So the question again, is it common problems to get resolved quickly in your organisation? Yes, always. No, not often. Yes, but only in my department. Yes, but not in my department. And I'll move over to the chat just for, I think it's Jamie you can't see.
Answer the questions as well. Just
okay. So yeah, I mean, some organisations identify problems easily, but really struggle to solve them problems. And I think that the key to problem solving is being able to follow a process, be able to identify the problem, and then be able to action it by getting some solutions and implementing the best solution possible. And that's what we're going to talk about with the tools and techniques. So, oh, there we go. I've actually got the results of the poll in front of me. So it's good to see a range of answers here, because everyone who's involved in this in this live session today work in different areas of work at different levels. So it is interesting to see that. So I will ask you a couple more questions moving forward, but let's just move on. So there are different problem solving approaches. Okay, so you can approach a problem in different ways. The rational problem solving approach looks at more like facts, figures, looks at information gathering, looking at data, being able to review that data. Now, often people consider data and information as mostly the same thing, interchangeable, if you like. And it's not really, data is a collection of values, can be characters, can be numerical, it can be, data off a survey, for example. But without that data being processed, it can't usually be used for the humans to read or understand or use easily. So usually data is turned into information for us then to be able to use in, say, a report, for example. So using that information to solve problems rationally. Now, creative problem solving, it is more about thinking about innovation, innovative solutions, and thinking about many different ideas to solve a problem. Now, usually the creative problem solving is done by groups of people in the organisation, but can also be being done individually as well. Now, effective problem solving is has a process, and as we say, if you could follow a process and work your way through that process, it makes it a lot easier, and it's a better way of tackling a problem because it's structured. People can follow that process, and if they're always following the same process in the workplace, then they are looking to review the problem the same way. It will become easy and it will become more transparent. Okay, so let's have a little look at the process here. So thinking about defining the problem, so finding out the root cause of the problem. As we said, you can look at the symptoms, you can look at signs or indications, but you've got to actually try and find the problem. So you define the problem and then you're analysing the problem itself. Now, then you may look at general potential solutions. So let me give you an example. So the problem could be that you have many people on the team that are calling in sick regularly. So you've got quite a lot of people being absent. So your problem is you haven't got enough staff for the job. So now you've got to be able to analyse the problem. So why is that problem happening? Then you can look at the why, what, where, when, how technique if you want, or we'll look at more problem solving techniques in the next slide. But you've got to look at generating the potential solutions. So how could we resolve that problem? So that problem could be, that people aren't getting on in the team, that people have got conflict in the team. It might be, generating solutions such as moving the team around, swapping shifts, but then selecting the best solution and taking action. So that action might be communicating with the people in the team separately to be able to come to the best possible solution. Or you might want to try a different approach, such as, a creative approach of getting all the people involved together, finding out what that problem is, you can't define it or analyse it yourself, and then coming to a different solution. So there's a couple of different ways you can do it, but having that process, I feel, is a way that you can structure the way you tackle a problem. And I think you could think about this as objectives in a plan of action. So problem solving techniques. Now there is a lot of problem solving techniques, models, frameworks for you to be able to use throughout. Now in this assignment, it does ask you to use some problem solving techniques, especially if you're aiming for the good pass. And it will ask you if you're definitely going to be working on innovation or change model units, or if you're looking at projects, it will ask you to look at different problem solving techniques. So let's just fire through a few of these. I'm not going to go into them in too much details, but you can always come back to this presentation and research that a little bit further. So let's have a look at CAT 1. So it is an anagram, and it's an analytical tool used for understanding the problem from the stakeholders' point of view. So you're looking at it from, the customers. The actor is what the A stands for, and that's basically the recipient. That's the role of the person who's delivering, so the person who's working there. Then you've got the transformation, which is the process that delivers the output to customer. Then you've got the Welton Chang, which is also seen as the world view. So it's who developed it actually use that word, but just think about it as world view because it's easier to understand. Then you have the owner, which is the stakeholder who has the overall authority. So that could be the project manager, the ops manager, the leader of the team itself. And then you've got the environment, which looks at the rules and constraints surrounding the business unit. So you've got the Catwell. Then the sixth thinking hat is a simple and effective group thinking. And what this process looks at is De Bono. He created this process, and he looks at it from like a visual perspective. So 6 people in a meeting, all wearing different coloured hats. An example is that the hats are symbolic, so you don't actually have to wear a hat. You could have a piece of paper saying, well, I'm the white hat, which is symbolic for facts and figures. And then you could have a black hat, which is symbolic for creative thinking. And then you could have a finisher, which is like a red hat. So that's the way he symbolizes it, which I think it's, you know, it is a good method. I've used it before and it does work, because you have to stay within your creative way of, or your functional way of thinking. Then you've got creative problem solving, and this is a way of identifying opportunities which are outside the realms of conventional thinking, so thinking more innovative, and it's usually done in a group process. To be completely honest with you, most of these are best used in a group. Action learning sets are a set of working professionals, usually between about 5 and 10 people, that are they seek to have a problem and they all contribute to the problem being solved in different ways. There's usually a facilitator that comes as outsourced. And a good example of when these are used successfully is with the NHS. The NHS use action learning sets to, use cross-functional teams within different departments to solve the problems. Then the next one is the 8D problem solving process. Now this process is a team approach to solving critical problems, usually in the production industry. The aim is to find the root cause of the problem, develop actions and stop similar problems occurring in the future. Now, Ford Motor developed this process, and it doesn't stand for different Ds or anagrams or whatever. It basically starts from D0 to D8, and D0 starts with preparing and planning for the actual process, and D8 ends with closure of the actual, thinking process. So the 8D problem solving process is good in production, and is part of the motor industry used this quite a lot. Next, we have Hairson's productive thinking model, developed by Tim Hairson. It is a framework, it's not a technique. So basically uses other techniques such as, brainstorming, lateral thinking, which looks at different ways of addressing challenges, different perspectives basically, and it applies it in different stages. So it's got 6 stages to this process, and it looks firstly at what's going on, all the way to aligning what resources are needed. And that thinking about what resources are needed for a solution is really important. The focus model is a team-based approach to problem solving and stands for finding the problem, organising the team to deal with the problem, clarifying the problem, using the problem and selecting a solution. So another anagram, but it sounds a little like the creative problem solving technique, but it's slightly different in the way that it's a process that can be followed like actions. The next one, Cynefin framework, it basically is a tool that consists of, using one model against another model, but also thinking about assessing the decisions. So you're looking at assessing the situation and then assessing the decisions that you're going to use in the future. The straw man concept is an important tool for collaborative problem solving. So again, team-based. in all the phases and at every level. It is basically in the context of problem solving. The straw man can be picked apart and put back together. So it's, if you think of that as a visual, everyone looks at the problem around the table, thinks about how they can completely pick that problem apart and put it back together in a useful way. So I know there's a lot to think about in your problem solving techniques. You know, there's many, these are the ones that I think are most beneficial for this unit, because you can break it down. And even if in the assignment it's asking you to evaluate, it's good to think about 2 different problem solving techniques, how you may use them, and then you know, say what's good about this one, what's not so good about this one, why you'd use this one maybe in this workplace, or why you'd use this one in that workplace. Okay, so let's just stop a second and ask another couple of questions. Okay, so 2 common problem solving approaches are the A and B approach, the thinking and solving approach, H and W approach, or the rational and creative problem solving approach. Okay, one sec. Just give it a couple more seconds. Okay, we almost have everyone on there. Can we put the, yeah. And we're just going to look at the results for that. Okay, so 2 common problem solving approaches. We have thinking and solving approach, the A and B approach, H and W approach, and the rational and creative problem solving approach. Most of you did get that correct, the rational and creative problem solving approach, and you are thinking about it from them 2 points of view. So whether you've got the facts and the figures and usually the one person just trying to solve that problem, or the creative problem solving approach. And the effective problem solving starts with, yeah, most of you were right there as well, defining the problem. Okay, so I know you're all with me because most of you are still on the same page. That's great. So now we're going to look at, well, as a leader and as a manager, what skills do we need to make effective decisions? Now, we all know that, you know, being a successful leader, manager, we need to make instant decisions. We need to make decisions that are, that need to be made on the vote. We need to be on the day. 1 second. No, all of the polls are anonymous there, Luca. Sorry. Yeah, only I can see them, so don't worry about that. Yeah, so making decisions can be difficult, and it depends usually what type of leader you are as to how you make decisions. You know, if you're a diplomatic and participative type of leader, you might want to get people's point of view before making decisions. If you work in an area of work where decisions need to be made quickly, and you need to just focus on what needs to be then, you know, that will also affect the way you make decisions. So, you know, if you are wanting to look at it from a perspective of why you make decisions and how you make decisions, it does depend on who you are as a person, but you kind of have specific skills. So, you know, the tasks skills that you have will help you to look at the problem recognition, so framing that problem and being able to think about that logically. Then, you know, inference drawing, which is what you already know, and finding evidence to read in between the lines, and idea generation, and being able to argue your thought process, even if that's just in your own mind. So next we have relational skills. So this is more about relationship management, you know, not only being a leader that really does, you know, have followers, you know, really does you know, attract followers, or you'll be able to deal with that conflict in the team if one person decides that this needs to be solved and one person decides that that needs to be solved. And climate building, so building that trust as well. So the procedural skills look at what you do, you know, what you do once you've found that problem, and, you know, the planning and process enactment. So the process enactment is the starting point of a specific process. So it's about turning that vision as to what you're going to do into action. Okay, before we go on to the next slide, I'm just going to have a quick look at the chat because I think we've got a couple of questions. Okay. So, you won't be losing any points on anything. This is a live session just between us, just to help each other out. And, you know, when I'm doing these polls, it's not any sort of formal assessment. It's just for me to know that we are on the same page. And if we're not all on the same page, I can talk about it a little bit more. So don't worry too much about that, okay? Okay. One of the questions in this assignment brief asks you what the difference between data and information is. And, you know, a lot of people can, you know, think about it as interchangeable. I know I spoke about this briefly before, but we need to look at data as a collection of values. So I've done a course evaluation survey with 40 of my learners, and from that data, I've found X, Y, and Z. So I might be able to get, you know, a bar chart that says this many people like this many people like that, this many people like that. So that's the data that I've gathered. But what are you going to do with that data? You then turn that data into usable information. So you can then, for example, if somebody says that, you know, they're not happy that the marking has taken more than 48 hours, or they're not happy with the resources in a specific unit, then you turn that information into, we find the data, see how many people are on the same page, and then we can use that information to improve. So that problem, if we can find the signs, we can find the symptoms, we can find the data when analysing that problem, and then be able to use that data to turn into useful information to be able to find a solution to that problem. Okay, so in my eyes, solving a problem, it might be because I'm one of a diplomatic leader by, you know, natural course. That's what I'd like to do. I like to get people's feedback. But in relation to theoretical models and research that's being done on problem solving and decision making, it has been found that groups are more effective decision makers than individual people. Now, I provided some reason here for that. So, you know, one of the key points here is one person doesn't have as much knowledge and resources on a topic as 5 people. You know, you're looking at the diversity and different people's perspectives there. You're looking at people's strengths and weaknesses and different you know, thought processes. If you've got a cross-functional team, for example, with a person from the marketing team, the sales team, you know, the operations team, the technical team, and you're getting them all together to solve a problem, which is maybe, you know, the deduction of customer satisfaction, or you know, the sales drop this term, something like that. You know, finding that, getting all of the people together to solve that problem, that the group can provide the opportunity as well to test the ideas, and look at ideas from different points of view. Okay, so let me just have a quick nose at the chat because I've got a couple more. So it's okay, no one's here to judge, Luca. We're all on the same page here, so don't worry about that. Okay, so yeah, groups in theory, you know, are more effective decision makers, okay? But, you know, at the same time, there are some downfalls, and we'll talk about them in a second. Okay, so let's now have a look at decision making. We've had a look there at, you know, the problem, finding the problem, analysing the problem, and looking at the process that we can do from there. Now let's think about the functional theory of decision making. So this functional theory of decision making is, you know, it follows a process. It ensures that the group decision has specific procedures to follow. Now, following them procedures will, you know, it'd be really important for us to be able to move forward and be able to action. You know, you can use these procedures and follow them in a meeting, for example, to make sure that you are, you know, flowing through that well. So let's think about it firstly. So as a group, like, you thoroughly discuss the problem. You look at the different areas. You look at how you can you know, to define that problem. So you're examining the criteria of an acceptable solution before discussing potential solutions. So you're throwing a few ideas out there, and then you can propose a set of alternative solutions. So this person might have this solution, this person might have this solution, and you're looking at what the positives and the negatives are for each solution. Okay, so it's about taking people's ideas on board, and sometimes you might need someone who is a facilitator to come from outside of the company to be able to manage these decision making processes and procedures to enable everybody to have a say, really. But yeah, following the functional theory, the functional theory was, you know, developed a long time ago, and it was developed in order to be able to think about communication between the team and giving everyone a chance, really. Okay, so why use decision-making procedures? It's in order to give everybody an equal say. It's about getting people to stay focused, you know, like you would with an agenda, for example. And you don't want any problem solving or decision making meetings to be an inefficient use of time. So it's important to be able to follow that, you know, that process and procedures to be able to, you know, go through it smoothly. Then, you know, you've got to think the difficulty of balancing the task and the rational dimension. So thinking about the task at hand being the meeting, or, you know, the process and that you're all going to follow. You're all getting involved to solve this problem, and you need to make sure that the problem solving solutions are rational and they stay on track. So keeping them procedures there in place to follow through, as with an agenda, is always useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a quick nose at the chat aside. So while we're here and I'm on the chat, I'm just going to ask one or two questions on the chat, not with the poll. So I'm just going to say, has anyone been involved in a decision-making process or procedure? Yes, Rashid, it will be recorded and sent out to you. Yeah, Luca, you're involved. Yep. And you too, Jamie. Okay. But no formal procedure. And I bet, Jamie, because there is no formal procedure, sometimes they can actually, you know, go off track. And, you know, that's that's time wasting. You know, keeping one procedure that you follow all the time can be useful, but using a number of different procedures can also be useful as well. So let's just touch through some of these procedures, okay? So the standard agenda. So the standard agenda, it's a linear process of 6 different steps. So the 6 steps look at, you know, as we've looked at on the other side, identifying the problem, analysing the problem, identifying minimal criteria for the solution, generating solutions, evaluating them solutions and selecting the best one, but then implementing the solution. And that's what's missing off some of the decision-making procedures, the implementation part. So the standard agenda, I think, can be, you know, added and, you know, slotted in easily to meet, to, you know, a monthly meeting or a strategy meeting or, you know, a quarterly meeting. Could have a quarterly problem solving meeting and where people air out the problems, and then you look at which one's the most important and then review that. Then, sorry, skip forward a little bit, brainstorming, which is the most common in generating ideas to improve productivity, but it also lets a lot of people get involved. It's about encouraging ideas and just letting them throw as many ideas as possible there, without criticising, without saying, well, that's a bit of a stupid idea. You know, it's letting them have their ideas and running with that. And then after the idea generation is complete, you can move on to finding which idea might be most suitable. Now, the nominal group technique is it's about independent idea generation. So what it looks at, so the members of the team silently write down, you know, their ideas. So what would they do? A facilitator, or, you know, the head of the group or the meeting host would record down the ideas. Then there's an interactive phase to discuss the ideas between them. Well, this is what I think I'd do, and this is the reason why. And then the group discusses each for clarification. So this is what this person sees as that point of view, and this is what this person, and then they vote to narrow down the best idea, and then they discuss the ideas received, see how many get the most votes, and then they repeat that again until they have just one solution to the problem. I think this is a really good technique, really good procedure, because it lets everybody have their say and in how the problem will be solved. So the consensus is basically a discussion to achieve agreement or support. There's a couple of different ways of doing this, but it's basically one person facilitates the discussion, the facilitator uses that discussion and uses the ideas to formulate proposals. So proposals, you know, solutions, or, you know, proposals for a new project, for example. Then a recorder will write down each proposal. So this is the formal idea, this is the formal idea. And throughout the discussion, the recorder reads the proposals out, and the recorder reads aloud the final decision for approval and modification. Now, I'm not really a fan of this because I feel like it's incomplete, because it doesn't really talk much about the implementation phase. But the next two, the voting and the ranking. So the difference between these is the voting. So the team or the group will cast votes in support or for against a specific proposal. Now, if you were to use that at the end of a consensus or at the end of a nominal group technique, then it could be useful, but it's incomplete to the point that the consensus doesn't finish it. It just says it's ready for approval or it's ready for modification. So then if people vote on what their idea is, or whether they approve it or whether they don't approve it, then that would sort of finish off that procedure in my eyes. The ranking is really good because you could scale each idea on a scale as 1 to 5, and you could keep that anonymous as well. And then you can use a point score to find out which one would be the best solution for the group, for the organisation, for the team. So, you know, and you can also use the ranking in conjunction with brainstorming. You can use a couple of procedures in conjunction with each other if you think that it will be right for your organisation. So That's a couple of different procedures, but selecting the right procedure depends on your organisation, depends on, you know, the person that's leading the team, depends on the person that's managing the strategy. But, you know, for an organisation to be successful, time needs to be allocated for, you know, reviewing problems, analysing the problems, you know, coming to a solution. Otherwise, problems will just be left unsolved. And if, you know, you don't use everybody's strengths and everybody's opinions, then people won't get buy-in to that change. And if you're going to be changing something such as a customer service standards and the way you deal with the customers from the first point of view, a lot of people on the team don't like change, and, you know, especially if they haven't been involved in that change. But if you're going to change something and they're involved in coming to the solution to make that problem better, then they'll get buy-in. So that means they'll be more motivated, you know, they'll feel part of the team. It meets the group's communication team. It also refers back to the 5 functions of the group decision making, the tasks being analysed all together, and everyone feels like they're in agreement as well. But, you know, picking that type of procedure is it depends on your organisation, how much time you have, who you're going to use, and, you know, you'll have to go from there. So downsides to using these procedures can be, or, you know, the paradox of using the procedures, they can take time. You've got to allocate that time out. People may resist because, for example, people might not like brainstorming. They would rather do a nominal group technique, or they might just want to be, you know, confidential and write theirs on a piece of paper. They might not feel confident or feel involved. So it's important to tailor the procedures to the group's needs. And, you know, also some organisations, especially larger organisations, they use an external facilitator to guide the group. And that can also be useful, even if it's just an external facilitator in the organisation who's not part of the problem, or who's not, doesn't have a direct, you know, a direct say in how the problem is going to be solved. So I'm just going to have a quick look at the chart before I move on to the last learning outcome and the last slide. Okay, so Luke is asking, can I ask you how you'd approach the unavoidable unhappiness which would generate from voting towards something in a certain way, and then make unhappy the ones who didn't vote in a certain way? Okay. So, of course, the majority always wins, but yeah, so, you know, it's a really good question. It's a really good point. So underpointing, eventually, so, I mean, people's morale go down if there's problems, especially when you're looking at team problems like conflict management, you know, dealing with conflict, dealing with, you know, I'll give you an example of a really big one that's going on in most organisations at the moment. Since COVID restrictions have come into place, some people get to homework, some people don't. You know, that is a really big problem at the moment. So if you are asking people to vote on whether they want to come into the office or they don't want to come into the office, yeah, okay, the majority is going to win, but it's important to be able to, as a manager or as a leader or the person that's doing that voting poll or getting the people involved, to say, everybody's opinion matters here. Now, we are going to go with the majority because at the end of the day, I want all of your opinions and I want, you know, everyone to be happy. But if you're not happy with it, we may be able to find another approach in the future. But, you know, at this moment in time, we're going to go with the votes, really. But if you wanted to, you know, mix that up as well, changing it to the ranking system so people aren't just saying I agree or I disagree, would also be really good at that point of view, because you can say, you know, on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you like this idea? And then they're not going, well, I just didn't get my you know, I didn't get my vote in. They didn't listen to my say. It would be more like, you know, we're looking at it from a point of view, and if it goes over this many points, this is the decision we're going to make. And if it goes, so from that point of view, it might be useful to use a different procedure. So how about if the majority is actually very slim? like 7 out of 12. Oh, that is a difficult one. That might be more going forward to, right, well, the majority, it was a close call today. So what we're going to do is we're going to reassess the situation in another 6 months, or we're going to set together another maybe brainstorming issue in 4 months' time to be able to see how we can weigh this up maybe in a different way that everyone will be able to understand and agree with. So yeah, it would generate a huge decision, but have a look into the different procedures because a different one might fit better. Okay. So once you've went through the 5 processes of, defining the problem, analysing the problem, thinking about solutions, coming up with the best solution, and you're thinking then about the implementation phase. And there are a lot of organisations do analyse different situations internally, externally, and then don't put together a plausible plan to actually be able to implement that change. Now, when you're looking at implementation, you need to look at who's going to be doing what resources are going to be required, who's going to be monitoring that objective, who's going to be the lead person, what's going to be the anticipated result, and any sort of progress notes. So this template can be found in Moodle. I also have about 10 different implementation plan templates. So if this one doesn't suit you and you don't want to create your own, you can always come to me. But the important thing is once you're actioning a change or a strategy or a solution or whatever it is you're going to be actioning, it's got to be communicated, reviewed. Every person who has an objective, you need to be monitoring it, reviewing it, and checking that them objectives are being put into place. And then you're finding a norm. So, it's not just it's going to happen and then maybe it'll change and then it'll maybe go back to normal. You've got to continuously monitor that change. And, there are plenty of change theories, change models that might be a useful topic for our next session. But yeah, implementing, has anybody used an implementation plan in the past? So have a look at the templates. If anybody has any questions, if anyone has any questions moving forward with implementation plans or they need any help with them, you can contact me about that and I can talk to you a little bit further. Now, that's the end of my presentation on solving problems, making decisions, and I know there was a lot to this session. Usually the session's at about half an hour, 40 minutes. How long have we got to? Nearly 50 minutes. So if you do have any questions or you want to just have a little chat between you or just ask me any questions, I'm going to be here. I'm going to remove the video because it's really hot in this room and unless you couldn't tell. And then we will just chat on the chat for a couple of minutes.